Welcome to Inside Scoop Live, the podcast where indie authors get personal, sharing insights about their books, their writing journeys, and their passions. I'm your host, Sherry Hoyt, and I invite you to join me for engaging conversations with both debut indie authors and seasoned veterans. Whether you're looking for your next great read or a bit of inspiration, you've come to the right place. Let's get started. Hi, everyone. Schalee Sanchez joins the show today to talk about her new book, The Humility You Want and the World Needs. We'll learn the life-changing secret great leaders know and how to lead with love, live with purpose, and influence with humility. Before we get started, here's the inside scoop on the author. Schalee Sanchez is a global leader, speaker, and author with over 20 years of experience leading diverse teams across cultures and causes. Having lived and worked in 5 countries, she brings a rich global perspective to her work. Fierce in her belief that every person is worthy and wildly capable of impact, she equips readers to lead with humility, live with purpose, and rise to their fullest potential with courage, clarity, and compassion. And you can learn more about Schalee Sanchez and her work at shaleesanchez.com. Well, hi, Schalee. Welcome to Inside Scoop Live.
Thank you so much, Sherry. I'm so grateful to be here with you today.
Yeah, I'm excited to learn all about you and your book. Can you tell us about the humility you want and the world needs? What is it about? And then maybe what was your inspiration behind the story?
Yes, so The Humility You Want and the World Needs is a book that enables people to develop and have personal growth tools that will enable them to be inspiring leaders and improve their relationships, as well as have an inner peace that is sustainable and steady and constant. And the inspiration behind writing this book is that over several decades, I've observed the consequences of arrogance and the damage that that does when a person is guided in that way and makes decisions based on self promotion and self gain. And then I've also seen the contrast of that, and I've noticed the difference that it makes when someone is guided by humility and makes decisions based on what is beneficial for others and the impact that that can have in a very positive way as I've grown in that understanding and began to implement that more in my life and allow humility to influence me, I wanted other people to have that opportunity to experience that themselves.
Okay. I like that. I mean, you can use it for business or personal, but I guess if you improve yourself personally, your business is just going to follow. So it's a both, right?
It absolutely is. Both of them are gonna be impacted, and that's one of the things that as I've gotten to have conversations with people around this topic, specifically out of the book, they're people who are extremely successful professionally, but they highlight how the character that they have in their professional life is also what influences and guides their personal life. And so it's the same thread that runs through all of it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an interesting time to write about humility. Why did you decide this was the right time to write a book about it?
That's a great question. And other people that have asked me that, I think about how there are very significant public figures who give a very stark example of the damage that can be done when you're hungry for power, when you're in it for personal gain, and that you're unwilling to listen to others. And in that kind of a society where we see such a negative influence of power and think about the damage that's being created around the world because of that, at times it can feel hopeless. And we can think, well, who's going to be able to stand up to that? Who's going to be able to make a difference when that tsunami is occurring of desire for power for personal gain? And in that is where there's really a beacon of light, a beacon of hope that humility offers. and helping us to understand that on an individual level, we do have an opportunity to make an impact. And that will come in a greater measure as we allow ourselves to be influenced by such an incredibly powerful virtue. And that virtue is humility.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's a misunderstood word for sure. Can you tell us what it is, how you define it, and then what do you think most people misunderstand about it?
Okay, this is a really fun part of many conversations that I get to have with people because so many people want to know, how is humility defined? What is it exactly? And I like to tell people, rather than try to define humility, I think that the really important aspect for us to look for and search after is, how can we embody humility rather than how can we define it?
Mm,
And what I mean by that is that we can understand intellectually what humility is. And so, by definition, kind of the simplest way to help people understand that is to say, well, it's the ability to look beyond yourself. And what that entails, though, is a very broad picture of how we treat other people and how we make decisions and how we impact the world with our actions, our words, our attitudes. And so it's kind of a fun thing for me to tell people that it's more like being on an adventure where on a daily basis you get to find opportunities in your interactions with people and the decisions that you make to see how you can, instead of focusing on how is this going to impact me,
mhm,
how is this going to impact other people that I am either leading or that I am in relationship with? Or it can even be a stranger, right? Someone that we don't even know, that we have a random opportunity to interact with at the store, on the street, or in the parking lot. And we get to see beyond, how is my life going to be impacted, and what is going to be the bigger impact that's made by the way that I choose to live my life?
okay. And I mean, of course, it's important to interact with the people you know in such a way, but I think that the random interactions are probably the most important. That kind of is what kind of spreads the seed to me. I feel like, the more people you reach out to with that attitude, random people, it's just going to like double and quadruple and, so on and so on and so on.
I agree 100%. And just like so many other things in life, you know, generosity and joy and kindness are contagious and they have a ripple effect. When we see someone have an attitude of humility and make that evident, in society, then it catches our attention and
Hmm.
it then allows for kind of a domino effect to occur where that person's choice then impacts another person's choice, and that impacts another person's choice.
Hmm.
And being able to see those opportunities where we get to have a positive impact in someone else's life, and we get to enhance the life and the well being of someone else.
Yeah, yeah. And in the process, you're helping yourself and making yourself feel better. Yeah.
Absolutely, and this is one of the fun things. I specifically remember a story that I was listening to a friend of mine who's a personal trainer, and he had gone to the gym one day and had been reading the book, and so he was very aware of noticing these opportunities to have a positive impact in someone else's life and think beyond himself. And he noticed these 2 high school boys that were working out, and so he chose to go over and give them some encouragement. It wasn't something they initiated, it wasn't something that was sought out by the high school students, and he just decided to go over and see them and notice them and give them some encouragement. And it turned around in a way that was very unexpected to him. He ended up being inspired by the story of these two high school boys who ended up being brothers. And as he heard more about their story, it was extremely uplifting to him, and so it had a really cool effect where, he got to positively influence and impact their lives, but then they did the same for him.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Now, ambition plays a complicated role in the book. Ambition is important, but how can you tell, or how can someone tell, rather, when ambition has, crossed that line from being a healthy drive into something that's more damaging?
Yeah, I'm glad, Sherry, that you brought up this because one of the things that's very common is that I'll talk with people and they'll say that you can't be ambitious and humble. Either you're going to be extremely ambitious or you're going to be humble. Like you have to choose one or the other.
Mm,
And this is one of the things that I really am passionate about helping people to see how the two actually can work together. And so, in a journey of allowing humility to influence us, it isn't about trying to get rid of your ambition. And this was a huge part of my personal journey with humility and a misunderstanding that I very strongly was influenced by regarding humility for a season of my life, where I thought that meant that I needed to stifle out any ambition that I had, and I needed to completely get rid of my competitiveness
mm,
and my drive and my desire to do things that if I was going to be humble, I needed that all to go away. And so, as I share about this journey, and I refer in the book to it being more like a dance, it's not this straight shot or this smooth path that we move forward on. It's got a lot of twists and turns, and part of being humble is making mistakes and failing and then doing it again. And allowing ourselves to be teachable and say, I don't know exactly how this is going to go, or I don't know what this is going to look like. So, to get back to the point of how do we keep ambition in check, I like to say that ambition is what fuels us, and humility acts as the compass or the GPS to keep
mm,
us moving in the right direction. So in the book, there are 7 transformational tools, and I use transformation prompts. They're tools that enable us to sit still, to
mm,
listen, to get feedback from other people. And as we do things like that, as we intentionally practice those things in our lives, then that is what keeps our ambition guided in the right direction. So it's not about trying to lessen our ambition or get rid of our ambition. Actually, I encourage people to increase their ambition. And I've
mm,
told so many people, and this has been something I've experienced myself, is that the more I allow humility to guide, the more ambitious I become because I'm driven by compassion, seeing opportunity for what I can contribute to enhance the lives of others. And that gives me a greater motivation. So when we allow other people to give us feedback, when we sit and be still and listen, that allows us to be guided in a direction where our ambition isn't going to be self serving. It's not going to cause damage. We're not going to pursue something to the detriment of other people. We're
mhm,
going to be able to see how what we're pursuing opens doors for collaboration and invites a greater improvement to relationships. and helps us to really value others in a way that we see how they are a part of our story as much as we are a part of their story.
Right, right. And that makes sense. I feel like if you're just steamrolling over everything with your ambition, maybe not everyone is going to feel that or notice it. I think I would. And maybe that's not apparent to everyone in themselves. I don't know. But it just feels like if you're doing things with humility and helping others and putting others first, you're going to feel good about it. And if you're not going to feel good about it. That's the hope, I guess.
There is a sense in all of us of understanding when something is right or wrong. And
Yeah.
so when we allow ourselves to notice that, we're pursuing something and we make a decision or we're working in a certain direction and then we notice, oh, like that isn't really being beneficial to the people that I am leading right now.
Hmm.
And so those are the kind of moments when we have opportunity to then make adjustments on the course, right? Because even though we have a compass, even though we have a GPS, we can still get off course a little bit,
Yeah.
and that's the point, is that we can be brought back
Okay.
to what we're doing is enhancing the lives of others and going to be something that improves the relationships that we have.
Okay. Thank you for clearing up my
And
thoughts.
well, I told you this is one of the parts that I'm really passionate about because it is possible for us to rise higher and bring other people with us. But so often we've seen the opposite of that. People rise to the top by themselves and just crush everybody else on the way or leave
Mm,
everybody else behind. And that doesn't have to happen. We can continue to get our strengths honed in and get to a place where we really can contribute at a increasing level and also help lift others up as we do that.
right. So, people reading your book, starting out reading your book, you mentioned the 7 transformational tools. Is there a way that you recommend them working through this or not?
It's a good question, and it's been interesting to watch readers who wanna get through the book, and so they'll read it in 3 days, and then other readers who take it very slowly and want to work through it at a very different pace, and still haven't read through the whole thing yet, and, it was published last June, so I have one recommendation to people, and I encourage people to not rush through it. The rest of it, I leave up to them. It's a very individual journey.
Hmm.
And so I want them to be able to embrace that in a way that is natural for them wherever they're at on their journey. So for some, that may mean just reading through the book, at least this first time,
Mm,
and for others, it may be very intentional in the ways that they interact and practice and take time to engage with the transformational prompts. But for someone who's never done that before, then the first time that they read it, that may not come very naturally. And so that for me is something that I give my readers a lot of freedom about, and that they can be able to gain what they need in the place that they're at on their journey.
right. It's like you said, it's an individual journey, and everybody learns differently too. You open your book with admiration for Abraham Lincoln. What about his leadership still feels relevant in today's world?
Yes, I still like looking at the example that Abraham Lincoln gives us because I believe it is still very relevant for us today. And there could be several actually things that I could highlight, but I'll name 3 right now. And one of the things that I think that Abraham Lincoln did really well was he had an ability to be empathetic. He was able to not only be willing to listen to people, but to truly understand, to really have a desire to see things from their perspective. And I think that that really enabled him to be more successful as a leader and have a very positive impact. The
Yeah.
second thing that I would say is that, and this is something that I think is humanly difficult for us to do. It kind of goes against the grain for most of us, but he built relationships with his rivals. Even in his own cabinet, he had rivals that he surrounded himself with because he wanted to foster diverse perspectives in order to be able to make better decisions himself. And it's hard for us to do that, I think. We tend to want to just have people that are gonna say, "Yeah, you're right, you're right, you're right, you're right." And that's not the healthiest way to be in a position of leadership because the truth is we're not always right. And we need to be able to acknowledge that, and we need to be willing to listen to people who see it from a different perspective and say, "You know what? What you're saying is actually better than the way that I was thinking about doing this."
Mm,
And I think that Abraham Lincoln did that well. And the third thing that I'll mention that I think is really relevant today is that, a lot of times there's a desire that's driven by our ego to want to make ourselves look super smart. And being in a position of leadership, we want to impress people with the words that we use and how we can speak so eloquently. And Abraham Lincoln kept his language very simple. In a storytelling way, he was able to convey complex ideas so that the people he was leading felt like he was approachable, his message was accessible, and he was able to inspire people. And I think that that's something that's still very relevant. That today, people want to know that they are at the same level as their leader
mm,
because it's very intimidating if a leader tries to put off this, I'm better than you air because of the way that he speaks. And Abraham Lincoln didn't do that. He made himself approachable by the way that he spoke and inspire people because I believe it helped them understand that they also were an important part of what was happening.
right, right. Wow, what a great reminder of what a phenomenal man he was. Yeah. There are so many things that he did that we aren't doing and are getting to be less and less able to do now. Like it's hard to have a conversation with someone with an opposing viewpoint
Mhm.
anymore. So, wow.
Yes.
We all need a
Yeah.
lesson from Abraham Lincoln for sure.
Well, the thing is, when we see that someone else was able to do it, that gives us the courage to at least try.
Right.
And I think that that's the value that his life still holds for us today is if he could do it, so can I.
Right. You talk about, well, actually the book pushes back on the idea that humility weakens leaders and or not even leaders, just everybody, that humility is a weakness. And that's not true. And you've talked about the why a little bit, but what does humility look like in the workforce when leaders are kind of under pressure?
I think humility is so important when there's pressure, especially because it enables leaders to stay calm and gives them the capacity to open themselves up to listening to other people's input rather than trying to isolate themselves
Mm,
in the decision making process. There's examples of leaders who have been in, crisis situations that have chosen to be overconfident and say, "No, I know how to handle this and I'm going to do it this way and this is the way it's going to be," that have resulted in very negative effects for the
mm,
people that were impacted by the decision. And on the flip side of that, there are examples of leaders who, in crisis situations, reach out to invite. And obviously, this is done in a very intentional way, not just anyone, but to invite people's support in making the decision and collaborating on how this is going to be most beneficial for everyone that is going to be impacted. And the results are so phenomenally better when a leader chooses to act in that way.
I imagine someone first starting to practice this, it's hard when you're in the middle of a pressure situation to stop and look outside yourself. Because what you want to do immediately, I've got to solve it right now.
Yeah, and that's a great point, and that's a lot of what the book that I wrote is intended for, is to help people practice this on a daily basis when the stakes aren't high,
Mm.
so that when that moment arrives, it'll come natural to respond in that way. And it's like anything, if you practice something over and over, then that's the way that you'll respond. And with humility, it's the same way. If we'll choose to cultivate this in our daily lives, in the small moments, in the insignificant situations, and in these opportunities that we have, you know, it is a great example to me, a story that I heard of a dad who was making a big decision about his career and about where he and his daughter were going to live. He was a single dad.
Mm.
I had one daughter. And instead of sitting in this place of, well, I'm the dad, I have to make the decision, and I'm going to be the one that makes sure that we're making the right decision. Over dinner one night, he brought up the options with his daughter and explained, what all the factors were and the decision he was making. And he shares later that her input was extremely valuable. The questions that she asked and the suggestions that she made were actually very beneficial in him coming up with a decision that wasn't what he initially was going to do.
Oh, wow.
And that the results of that years later continued to be highly positive for him and his daughter. So think about, those moments kind of being the practice. Then in higher stake situations, a leader has already cultivated that posture and is able to respond in a way, in a situation where it impacts more people with that same attitude.
Yeah, yeah. I love that example. It's so empowering too.
I
Yeah.
know it is. Yeah, it's really encouraging. And that's been one of the things that I've enjoyed so much about this journey since publishing the book and having all of these conversations with people about the topic of humility and learning from them and seeing how humility really does have all of these different facets and ways that it plays out in our lives and influences us.
Yeah. So, when someone finishes your book, what's the one shift you hope starts showing up in how they work and lead or interact with others or all of the above?
Yes, I would like to say that there is something specific as the author of this book that I want people to walk away with. The truth is, though, as the author, I don't have control over that. And I allow humility to play its role. So for one person, it's going to have a very different effect than it will for someone else. Going back to what I talked about earlier, that this is a very individual journey. And
Hmm.
so, there's going to be someone who has felt like they've had to stifle their ambition. They've had something that they have been trying to get rid of in their life. And after reading this book, they'll be able to understand the truth that they can be humble and pursue that. And for another person, they're going to be in a position of leadership and come to a place of being at peace with themselves and secure enough in themselves that they can invite correction from other people. And
Mm.
that's going to wildly shift their leadership and the impact that they have. And then for other people, it will have a ripple effect in their relationships at home and their ability to listen and be empathetic. So there are a wide variety of shifts that I believe will occur as readers open themselves up to allowing humility to influence their lives.
Okay. Do you have a website where people can learn more about you and your work?
Yes, I do have a website, and it is my name. I'll spell it out. Schalee, Sanchez, Sanchez. So it's ShaleeSanchez.com. And you can learn about the book. You can learn about the one-on-one sessions that I offer, about the speaking engagements that I do. And one of the things that is not on my website yet, but will be soon, is I'm co-authoring a children's book about humility, and I'm super excited. That will release in the fall this year. So that'll be great when I get to make that available.
Oh, I love that because children need the same lessons and then they learn it way before we do. You know, it's going to be a better world just automatically.
Absolutely. And the great thing is that as parents, I have 4 children. And so, as parents, as we're teaching our children about humility and reading this book with them, we'll also learn with them. And so,
Hmm.
it's going to be great.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Shelly, is there anything else you wanted to add today?
I am so grateful, Sherry, for the opportunity. I'm so grateful for getting to share this message. And so I really hope that the people that are listening today will have that courage to invite humility into their life and see the incredibly positive results that it will have.
Thank you so much for joining me today for my interview with Schalee Sanchez, author of The Humility You Want and the World Needs. You can learn more about the author and her work at ShaleeSanchez.com. And be sure to check out our other interviews at InsideScoopLive.com.